Good morning, and we're glad to have you with us. Welcome back to our daily devotions. We're now in the final chapter of the Gospel of John. Man, I have loved doing this book. It's just, there is so much in here. And I hope that you've kind of had that same experience as we've been going through it, just realizing, wow, there's so much God is saying and doing in this book that I maybe hadn't even noticed before. Anyway, today we're going to be looking at chapter 21. We're going to go just verses 1 to 7. So I invite you to hear the word of the Lord. Later, Jesus appeared again to the disciples besides the Sea of Galilee. This is how it happened. Several of the disciples were there: Simon Peter, Thomas, nicknamed the twin, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two other disciples. Simon Peter said, "I'm going fishing." "We'll come too," they all said. So they went out in the boat, but they caught nothing all night. At dawn, Jesus was standing on the beach, but the disciples couldn't see who he was. He called out, "Fellows, have you caught any fish?" "No," they replied. Then he said, "Throw out your net on the right-hand side of the boat, and you'll get some." So they did, and they couldn't haul in the net because there were so many fish in it. Then the disciple Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his tunic, for he had stripped for work, jumped into the water, and headed to shore. All right, John, well, get us started here.
Well, as I was looking at today's passage, I was thinking it's an opportune, a serendipitous segue into our next sermon series. We just had Easter this past weekend, and we're looking where we're going forward with, and we have a series that we're calling as in reclaiming, re-envisioning, reimagining, all the different things. We want to not go back to normal, but we want to take the lessons we've learned and kind of recapture that spirit and move forward with what we have, rather than going back to normal. There's such a temptation to want to go back to normal, and that's exactly the temptation we see here for Peter and the disciples. It's after Easter. They've all seen the risen Christ, but Jesus hasn't been with them for some short period of time, and they're wondering what's next. What do we do now? And Peter, who's always kind of the initiator, says, "Well, I'm going fishing." He's going back to his old life. He's going back to normal. And I imagine that he might have even had family that was kind of happy about the decision. Like, all right, we're finally done with this whole Jesus thing, this whole wandering the Judean countryside thing, and he's finally going to go back to earning a living. And the other disciples, they're like, "Well, I guess we'll join you. We'll join you too." And so they're fishing, and we see this recapturing of the original calling of the disciples. Like, this is a kind of recommissioning that recalls the original moment when Jesus called them, when they were these fishermen. Here's this guy who he's a rabbi. What does he know about fishing? And he tells them to throw in the net, and they find this incredible catch, and Peter is overcome and says, recognizes that Jesus is a holy man at the very least. Not sure what else he might be, but he's ready to follow Jesus. And we see that kind of scene here, that Jesus recalls that moment, not to call them, but rather to recall them and recommission them to his purposes and his service, to move forward rather than going back to the old life, going forward into a new and better life that Jesus wants to bring them into.
So I totally, I'm with you. I feel like the spirit that I imagine that Peter has in this moment is one of kind of resignation, because Jesus rose from the dead. Peter saw it. Okay, Jesus is amazing. But Peter blew it, right? All the disciples, they ran away. They'd proven themselves unworthy. And so in one sense, they're like, wow, amazing for Jesus. This is incredible. Look what he did. But I guess we've been disqualified because before they're like, let us sit at their right and left hand in the kingdom. And, they thought they were going to have kind of a piece of the glory. They were going to be the kind of inside entourage. But they clearly disqualified themselves in the kind of the moment when it mattered, right? During the trial of Jesus and his crucifixion, they all ran away. And so now they just kind of like, now who they really are has been proven. Everybody can see it. Surely, at the very least, they can see it. And I feel like that's something that's so relatable, that so oftentimes I've seen Christians who are gung-ho and excited about Jesus, and hey, we're gonna kind of charge the gates of hell with a squirt gun kind of people. And I love that spirit. And then they stumble. And what ends up happening is the sin that was always in them comes to the surface. The sin that was always in them, but they didn't know was there. They sort of thought they were done with. They sort of like get this idea, wow, I'm so saved. I'm really beyond all of this. That same sin comes back, and they just feel so defeated and basically decide this is like all was a charade. I was never worthy of this. This is always a lie about me. And I feel like that right there is the real danger. So you talk about the next sermon series, our last one, Studying John, has been called Grace and Truth. From the first line, it says that Jesus came to show the Father, reveal the Father, specifically in the sense of bringing grace and truth. And I think that what ends up happening in those moments is that we fall for a lie from the devil, that we've not been changed at all, and that all we are and all we will ever be is sinful. And ultimately that it's us that needs to kind of make ourselves more than that if we're ever going to be it. And then that's the lack of truth. That's what the liar does. The second thing is that there's this the lack of grace that we extend to ourselves. We want God to accept us as the perfect people we wish we were, but are reluctant to accept God's grace for the sinful, broken, always in need of grace people that we will always be. And so that there's a sense in which after this moment of failure, this is actually the moment where these guys can experience God's grace, right? Not just his stamp of approval for the fake I'm perfect person, but his grace for the sinners they are. And so oftentimes I end up meeting with Christians who just are ready to throw in the towel, just like Peter and some of these other disciples, when they have stumbled and they just feel so defeated, and I'm sorry, I can't help volunteer in this way anymore because they've now seen what a fraud they are. And I think, oh no, now you're more useful than ever. Now you don't believe in yourself. Maybe this is a chance for you to start really believing in Jesus. Maybe instead of telling people, hey, look at me, maybe now your ministry will be, look at him. And I feel like that's the moment of grace and truth. And that's exactly what's happening here, is these guys that feel so defeated, they've just gone back to the one thing they know they're good at. Let's just leave that life behind and feel that sense of sorrow and shame about it. Jesus now comes, and there's this really clever way, as you pointed out, it's in Luke 5, where Jesus first calls the disciples, does the thing, just as you were saying. And so it's almost like he's coming because they don't know who he is yet. He comes to, and sort of is kind of, I don't know, it's like his trademark trick. Like, hey guys, remember this one? And it's sort of like a little inside joke. Hey guys, it's me again. The same one who called you when you were undeserving and sinful before, I'm back. I'm calling you. Now that you know who you actually are in a way that you didn't before, the one I always knew you were, I'm calling you again. And so I feel like as we're reading this, what I hope that you're hearing from it, because I know all of us, if we're honest, we can look at those moments where we've fallen short and where we've disqualified ourselves, and why it is we shouldn't be in ministry, why it is we shouldn't be leading anything, goodness knows. And I'm telling you that is just as true of me and of Pastor John. We could give you a long list to explain why we don't belong in the roles that we're in. But we don't have to be qualified. It is Jesus's qualification. And what we have to be is just repentant and honest and receptive to the grace of God. And I feel like if we could do that, now we're actually doing it in Jesus' strength rather than our own. I feel like that's when ministry can take off.
I love how you said that when you're kind of broken in this way, then maybe now finally you're qualified because you're getting out of the way and you can point people to Jesus instead of yourself. And I don't know, this is maybe kind of strange, but there was a story that was really powerful to me as a kid. I was really into martial arts for a time, and there was this Korean story of this young warrior who was being trained, and he wanted to go off to war, and the master kept telling him he's not ready, he's not ready. Finally, he said, forget it, and he went off to war. And then, later on comes back bruised and beaten and almost killed, and he rather than sitting in the first spot because he was the teacher's top student, he sits in the last spot in the most humble location. And the minute he kneels down, his teacher says to him, "Now you're ready, go." And I think about that, like it's humility, which is being maybe not thinking ourselves as dirt, but rather of being down to earth, of being honest about who we are, not too high, not too low, just being who we are, being authentic in that way. That finally qualifies us in the sense that God can now really do something through us. I remember when we were looking to hire, we've hired, a number of people since I've come on staff, but I remember one particular person we were looking at who we decided not to hire. And I remember in discussions afterwards, some people brought up that, he's kind of a broken person. And one of the staff said, I think the problem is that he's not broken enough. Like all of us kind of sensed this kind of hardness and pride that was still there, despite all the suffering that he had gone through. He still was kind of holding on to this, that he was going to power through this. And it was that thing that even a lot of people who weren't our staff who tried working out with him just felt like, yeah, there's something more that he needs to go through, or allow to go through him before he's ready to be with us.
All that is so beautiful and true. And so I'm going to close this in prayer, but as we do, I hope that you can perhaps bring before the Lord some of those reasons why you are not qualified. And instead of letting the liar, the evil one, use those to discourage you, allowing those to be the places that you celebrate the incredible grace of God in your life. So I'm going to just give us actually a second of silence, and then I'm going to lead us in prayer as we sort of recall and bring some of these things, hold them before Jesus, and then I'll close us. Lord, if I were to try to enumerate all of the ways that I have fallen and failed, there just wouldn't be enough hours in the day or days in the year to be able to do it. And yet, your mercies are new every morning. Your grace is always more than my ability to sin. God, what an amazing gift. What an amazing promise. What an amazing comfort that I don't need to be perfect because you are perfect. I don't need to be powerful because you are powerful. I don't need to have perfect motives because you are perfect love. So God, we recognize the amazing grace that you have had in our lives. And Lord, I pray you would send us out, not as heroes of righteousness, but as people who can testify, be trophies for your grace, testify to the grace that you have for sinners. That is the good news, the gospel we get to share, and we're so thankful we get to because of Jesus Christ. It's in his name we pray. Amen. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow.